No better person to talk to about that than our next guest, Mad Dog Sports Radio host, attorney down in Houston, the epicenter of the Deshaun Watson situation. My good pal Mike Meltser back with us here on 93.7 The Fan. Mike, are the Steelers going to catch a break and miss Deshaun Watson this year? Are they going to get Jacoby Brissett and Josh Dobbs for 2 games against the Browns?
Boy, it sounds like that's a possibility because I kind of guesstimated this, Pony, the last couple of weeks on my shows that I used a wide range of, it could be as low as 4 games, maybe as high as 10. But the more that keeps coming out, the 2 new lawsuits, the HBO Real Sports story from 2 weeks ago, this big New York Times expose, you kind of feel like, and I don't know what's going to happen, that a year suspension is not completely off the table. That's kind of what it feels like, right?
I mean, it just feels like this is getting worse and worse for Deshaun Watson, and new things might keep coming out. What is the impact, you think, of the Texans now being added to this lawsuit in practical terms?
I would say it just kind of makes it more of a mess, Chris, that, one thing I wonder about, okay, so Tony Busby is the attorney for the alleged victims, the plaintiffs. Now there are 24 of them. What I wonder about is he's adding the Texans as a defendant. At least that's what he said in a statement yesterday. So the Texans have deep pockets, and people like to typically sue defendants with deep pockets. Deshaun Watson is one, but they are an even bigger deep pocket. What I wonder about is if the Texans are being added to this lawsuit now, I am wondering, guys, why they weren't added to this lawsuit before. Because I'm wondering what new information was really learned from the New York Times story, not if you're a regular person like Andrew Filipponi or Mike Meltser or somebody like that, but if you're a lawyer who has been litigating this since last March of 2021. Like, was there any new information in the New York Times story from 2 days ago by Jenny Vrentas that made Tony Busby say, oh, I never knew this, now I should add the Texans as a defendant? I feel like if that were the case, I'd wonder about the depth of investigating that's actually going on at his law firm. I don't want to cast aspersions, but I'll just give you guys an example. This whole thing about the non-disclosure agreement that was apparently provided by the Texas Director of Security, a guy named Brent Nakara, they have a deposition excerpt in the story. That deposition expert, like Deshaun Watson's the guy being deposed, which means he's being asked questions most likely in that little Q&A by either Tony Busby or a lawyer working for his firm. So that excerpt is never going to be news to Tony Busby. So I'm wondering why now to add the Texans to this lawsuit.
Mike, do you think that Deshaun Watson can still at this point get these women to settle and therefore clear up his status with the NFL before the start of the season? Is that on the table in your opinion?
I think it's always possible. I don't think either side wants to take this thing to trial. I don't think Deshaun wants to deal with 24 lawsuits at once. I don't think I have doubts as to whether I'll say all 24 women want to take these to trial. And it always comes down to, I would say in this case, not just the money part, but also like what's going to be in the non-disclosure agreement that comes with a settlement. I don't think it's going to be just about the money. It'll be mostly about the money, which is fine. But I also wonder, are they going to negotiate for, hey, as part of the settlement, Deshaun Watson has to release a statement, and here is what he needs to say. So I wonder about that. But yes, settlement is always on the table. There is going to be a deadline here for discovery at the end of this month. And so I wonder, this is something Albert Breer from MMQB has pointed out, I wonder if in 3 weeks from today or tomorrow, if that's going to be a deadline that might spur a settlement. It hasn't happened yet, but it's always a possibility.
Mike, what do you think? Well, so I have a lot of questions about this still. What do you think baseball's handling of Trevor Bauer is going to have to do from an NFL perspective? The way baseball dropped a hammer on him, with the NFL maybe looking at that other major league and how they handled something, sexual misconduct that was alleged and crushed a big-name player with a suspension. Do you sense that the NFL is going to have an inclination to not want to look soft on a situation like this?
Chris, I'll say it might be a minor factor from a public relations standpoint. I don't know that would be a major factor. And I do have my own questions about the length of baseball suspension against Bauer, even though I find him to be a detestable figure. But there is, in that matter, as I understand it, some admitted or conceded behavior that they can go off of to justify that 2-year suspension, whereas we don't really have that here. Deshaun Watson's defense hasn't conceded much other than apparently there were 3 times where he had allegedly consensual sex with the people who were giving him massages. He hasn't admitted to any violence or anything along those lines. So I would say maybe a little bit of a factor from a public relations standpoint, but I don't think it would be a big factor. My 2 cents on that.
Mike Meltser, Mad Dog Sports Radio, and attorney down in Houston with the latest on the Deshaun Watson situation and the way that it could affect the Steelers if Watson is suspended and can't play against them this year. Mike, the happy endings comment from Watson's attorney, how do you think that factors into this whole suspension situation and the civil cases as well?
It does not help him as far as the public relations. I fundamentally, guys, do not understand why the Watson legal team is doing as much media as possible. Removing my lawyer hat off and taking my media hat on, I love it when people talk because it gives people like us content. But if I put my lawyer hat back on, to me, the strongest thing that they can say, Rusty Hardin and his team, is, listen, 3 months ago, there were 2 grand juries. One in Houston and Harris County, one in Brazoria County, which is right next to Houston. 24 people combined on those grand juries found there was no probable cause that any crime was committed. Now, with that, that's not all 24 women. That's I think a limited number of complaints. I believe only one woman actually addressed the grand jury in Harris County specifically. But the point is, that's the strongest thing they have to go on. That burden to press criminal charges is not a high one. It's, was there probable cause that a crime may have been committed? 2 grand juries said no, and they chose not to indict Deshaun Watson. I believe they should just rest on the strength of those grand jury decisions. And I don't see the upside of Rusty Hardin making hypothetical comments about athletes getting happy endings. I just don't know what the upside is, how that serves his client. I don't think it really has anything to do with how practically the civil cases work. So I think it's a great question, Andrew, because Tony Busby, he put on Instagram or a statement or something. He said Rusty Hardin may have single-handedly lost his cases by saying that on the radio last Friday. That to me is a preposterous take. Here's why: that statement by Rusty Hardin is not evidence. It is not admissible. What your lawyer says outside of court is not going to be admissible if these cases go to trial. Deshaun Watson didn't say that. Rusty Hardin said that. He may not have even said it about Deshaun Watson, and it's not under oath. He's not under cross-examination. That statement by Rusty Hardin, it is not, in the literal sense of the word, evidence.
Mike, what do you think is the most likely recourse if this continues to drag on and there's no real level of resolution for either side here? There's no settlements. What's the NFL's recourse, just to put him on ice again this year at some, to commission, or no, I guess that didn't happen last year. The Texans just sat him and it was just kind of out there. So what does the NFL do if season rolls around and nothing has actually been determined in this?
So they have the opportunity to put him on the exempt list, which was discussed, I know, a lot last year about the idea of, all right, he's kind of put on ice, as you mentioned, Chris, and he gets paid his, whatever it is, $1 million salary this year. My sense, my inclination is I think the NFL needs to do something before the season. I get the sense the Browns expect Deshaun Watson to be available at some point this year, maybe later rather than sooner. So I think what they might do is say, just for instance here, roll with me, 8-game suspension or 10-game suspension, but also with a caveat or a contingency built in that, hey, if we find out more information that we were not aware of during our investigation, we absolutely reserve the right to add games either in 2022 or maybe in 2023. But I believe that you will see some sort of suspension in the next month or so. I would be more surprised if they decide, okay, let's put him on the exempt list and address a suspension later. I think they probably need to hand out the punishment sooner rather than later. That is my sense of the decision that's facing them.
Mike, if the civil suits proceed and Watson were to lose in court and lose his opportunity to play because of it, could the Browns get the guaranteed money back? What do you know about the contract here? Is it $230 million to Watson no matter what?
I would lean towards yes. I haven't looked at the exact copy of the contract to see the contingencies that have been built in, but my sense, Poni, in remembering all the reporting about it at the time it happened, the trade 3 months ago, is, the Browns basically they almost bought the asset as is, if you will, and this is a situation where it's like it seems like there's not going to be criminal liability based on those grand juries. Typically, these contracts, like I've read a lot of them, you can fire an employee for cause, and it'll be things like, hey, if you're, charged with a felony or convicted of a crime like this, or you violate company rules, that sort of thing. But I feel like the Browns might be on the hook for that sort of thing. Maybe they could try to, like the Patriots with Aaron Hernandez, decide to withhold the money and then fight it out. I ultimately don't think it's going to get to that stage, because I will tell you guys this. And I feel like this has been an under-discussed part of this story because people just don't know how things work down here. To actually go to a trial takes a long time. I'll give you an example. My firm had a trial 3 months ago, a simple breach of contract that was essentially a 2-day trial. We tried that this March. That case was filed in July 2018, so it took 3.5 years. We're going to have another trial this fall on a case that was filed in March of 2020. So that's 2.5 years. But here's the thing about those cases. We could try those cases at any point during the year. Deshaun Watson can't do that. They're already putting freezes on these cases starting on July 1st, because July 1st until the end of the football season, he can't participate in a trial, which means there's not going to be a trial in 2022. I'd be very surprised if there was a trial in 2023 because, again, they're working with a small calendar. It's like January to June. The court system here is backed up, even from Hurricane Harvey, from COVID-19. Like, ideally, cases will take from the moment of filing until the trial. Ideally, it's 18 months. You throw in all these factors, the backup from the hurricane a few years ago, the COVID-19 backup as well, plus you can only try it within like 5 months. And there are 24 women suing Deshaun Watson. I'm going to guess that kind of trial or all of those cases, that's going to take, I don't know, a couple of weeks. And so I can't see these cases being tried until 2024. I just don't know how the administration of it would work.
Wow. Mike Meltser, that's why we have him on, for information like that. Mad Dog Sports Radio, Deshaun Watson, he is following this down in Houston. Great stuff, Mike. Thank you so much.
Poni, Chris, thank you so much. Enjoy your days.